Who hasn't dreamt of seeing the world? Everyone has at some point, and thanks to the Industrial Revolution, this dream seemed to become attainable for the average, well, slightly above average rich bloke. Cities started growing faster than ever, factories replaced large farmlands, and the mobility of mankind was about to grow to unprecedented levels. Already at the time of the first automobiles have there been people with the goal in mind to create a mass market vehicle. To this day you can see them all over the world trying to revolutionize the idea of a people's car, sometimes with more and sometimes with less success. The history of Volkswagen begins before the Beetle, as people know it nowadays. To understand its creation we have to take a short look back to the past. The year is 1908. Henry Ford just unleashed the Model T onto the world, the first car of the masses if you will. The Model T of the Ford Motor Company brought mass mobility to the Americans, and it sold accordingly well. When the cheapest Model T set you back $825 in 1909, that price fell thanks to its mass production to a whopping $260 in 1925. Today that would be a whole 4,550 euros or $4,700. What a rip-off. For that money I could have a third of a Dacia Sandero. While Henry Ford was sure to have completed the car game forever and looked at all the cash he was raking in, after all the Model T was selling like hotcakes. Hotcakes however, or really plain bread, is something you could get in Germany too, for a literal bucket of cash that is. The Weimar Republic was plagued by tons of problems, one of those being inflation. The Germans could at best dream of spending their millions of Reichsmark on warm soup. A car? That is something exclusive for the richest of the rich only. Even though it was Carl Benz who patented the first modern automobile in 1885 and started a serial production as early as 1894, it was a far cry from what anyone could remotely consider a people's car, like the Model T the Americans would come to have. America learned to love the car. Even Great Britain and France began building up their own automotive industries. Germany, however, was left behind. So far, in fact, that it allowed the Americans to start selling their cars over there. Ford built its factory in Cologne back in 1925, and in 1929 General Motors even outright bought the largest German manufacturer at the time, Opel. Times certainly have changed since then. The German automotive industry was for the largest part plagued by the continued crises of the Weimar Republic. Should the good old Kaiser in all of his wisdom remain right? Was the car nothing but a product of its zeitgeist, a mere phenomenon of the moment? Quo vadis mankind? Mustang? Or Mustang? Nevertheless, the idea of an affordable car for the masses remained in the heads of many people. Adolf Hitler had a vision. Well, that man had a bunch of visions. The one that we want to talk about is that of the mass mobilization of the German people. No, not that one. The mass motorization of the German people. The Autobahn was by no means a novel idea of Hitler. As far back as the Kaiserreich have there been plans to expand the road network and build bigger roads between major cities, but just like with everything in life, some minor tidbit had to get in the way. After the loss of the First World War, it was now up to the Weimar Republic to build those streets. This is also when the name Autobahn pops up for the first time. The Republic, however, had way more pressing issues to solve, so any major road building was very limited. That was about to change in the Third Reich. Hitler approved in November 1933 the creation of Kraft durch Freude, strength through joy, an organization with the goal to offer holiday trips and other means to spend one's pastime. Most of these would include some sort of vacation within the Reich's borders, be it by train or by ship. And as early as 1934 there was also the start of the Volkswagen project. One can only guess how that meeting played out. Gentlemen, what have you brought me today? Ah, yeah, I have a great spot for the big ass factory. Ah, that's very good. Yeah, and I have the great prototype. Ah, yeah, they are very beautiful. I already have the perfect name for them. In 1934 they already announced the begin of the Kraft durch Freude Wagen. And here you really have to praise the talent in name giving. Kraft durch Freude Wagen. Anstatt des Kraft durch Freude Wagens bei Fallersleben. What concise names that go off the lips like finest silk. Too bad the average Joe has the stupid tendency to shorten everything. And with this we begin the story of the KdF Wagen. We are now in the year 1939. The W30 prototype has been tested diligently for over 2 years. A big campaign has been launched to convince the people to put their money aside to eventually get in line to order their own KdF Wagen. It is just a minor killjoy that the mob got it their way and the thing is now called Volkswagen Factory instead of Factory of the Strength through Joy car located close to Fallersleben. The car was finally ready to be shown to the world, and the international press must have been absolutely elated. After all, they were allowed to drive the vehicle from Berlin all the way to the factory in today's Wolfsburg. Said factory was by now also ramping up, with features like their own vocational school and a whole power plant for themselves. Soon the people would be throwing their hard-earned money at them. And that is when the first major order came in: maintenance and repair of bombers. Just like with everything in life, here too some minor tidbit had to get in the way. In October, the whole factory was rescheduled to special production, as it was called, and instead of Hermann and Lieschen's Herbie, you could now see Kübelwagen, Schwimmwagen and the Type 87. To get into more detail, let's start with the least known of the bunch, the Type 87, also known as the Commander's car. It was an off-road vehicle which from the outside looked almost identical to the KdF wagon, but thanks to its all-wheel drive it was able to overcome gradients of up to 75% or roughly 37 degrees. That's pretty handy if you want to overcome, I don't know, some dunes near the Mediterranean or God knows what they have in Eastern Europe. Ultimately they built 767 until the end of the war. And while we're talking about all-wheel drive, let's take a look at the Schwimmwagen. It must have come as a great surprise to the Wehrmacht during the invasion of Poland that bridges can be destroyed and that an engine lost water about as much as the average cat does. So it was time for another special vehicle. Saying it has some outer resemblance to its predecessor would be quite a benevolent feat. And uniquely for this car produced tub would protect the engine from water, and if you actually make it to the high seas or some lake, you were able to push down a little propeller. Imagine, if only they'd shown that one to the Kaiser back in the day, Germany would easily have been the first mass motorized nation in the world. The Schwimmwagen, or swimming car in its versions Type 128 and 166, would prove to be a big success. It was used on all front lines, and even after the war it was a surefire way to make quite a few guys have a very good time. With 14,000 cars built, it is to this day the most produced amphibious vehicle. The Schwimmwagen had to be based on something, and that is where the Kübelwagen enters the fray. Now, if someone makes a joke about the Wehrmacht marching through all of Europe in their Beetles, then it is my duty as a fun-loving German to tell them that they are wrong. The darling of the Wehrmacht, if you want to call it that, was a far cry from the round and cutesy KdF wagon. For the war, they needed something different, something light and boxy, with enough ground clearance and a cheap body. This car would be exactly what they wanted. The air-cooled engine would work, for the most part, in both North African heat and freezing Russian cold. Its lightweight allowed it to go off-road, even without all-wheel drive, and therefore it should hardly be a surprise that it was by far the most produced vehicle of the Volkswagen factory, with more than 50,000 of them being built, and it would be the only one to be given a successor in the decades after the war. Talking about successors, roughly 65,000 Kübelwagen, Schwimmwagen and Kommandeurswagen were built during the war. Then that means there must have been tons of KdF wagen too, right? Of course not. Before the war, 630 KdF wagen have been in the pipeline, all of which would be appropriated for the party or the Wehrmacht. During the war, pictures were made of more KdF wagen being produced to keep up the facade of their production and to make sure people were still ordering them. Although when our Volkswagen friends would try to inquire about their order, they would have the same fate as our Trabi comrades would have years later.
Zurzeit sind alle Kundenberater im Gespräch. Bitte warten Sie.
337,000 people paid to get on the waiting list of the KdF wagen, and they would only get an order number once they paid 750 Reichsmark, which adds up to roughly 250 million Reichsmark, or in today's money 1.1 billion euro. At this point, converting it to dollars hardly matters. That's a lot of money, especially considering that the war was lost and not a single customer got their KdF wagen. But surely what we know today as Volkswagen would be quick to compensate them, right? And with this we end the chapter of the KdF wagen. It is 1945, the factory survived Allied bombings comparatively well. Not a single KdF wagen would come into private hands, and now Brits and Americans are looking at what is left of the factory and the Reich's People's Car. Neither of them really liked the idea of a Volkswagen corporation. After all, the GIs already had their own Ford factory in Cologne. So, should this be the end of the dream of a German people's car? Obviously not. We all know what became of them today. In the next video. So, thank you so much for everyone who has watched the video all the way. If you liked it, a thumbs up and a comment would help the channel go a long way. And have a nice day, everyone.